Welcome to the program. Now, with the state of Nigeria's economy among the top issues for voters to decide upon in 2023, there have been several requests for specifics on the economic agenda of the presidential candidates running for Nigeria's highest office. PDP's candidate Atiku Abubakar, while speaking in Lagos, where he laid out his economic agenda at a forum hosted by the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, said he's going to embark on some very, very critical issues that will help to rejig Nigeria's economy. Well, Arise Business correspondent Odilim was there and tells us more about that.
The Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI, held a private sector economic forum on September the 13th to review the economic agenda of the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar. The candidate used the hashtag on Twitter, Atiku@LCCI. In his opening remarks, Dr. Michael Olawale Cole, president of the LCCI, said Nigeria needs a new economic order.
We need institutional reforms and sound governance, which are very critical to creating a new economic order for our very, very great Nigeria.
Dr. Ayo Teriba, economist and chair of the LCCI Economic and Statistics Committee, laid out the points he wanted Atiku Abubakar to address.
Everyone would like to know how you will improve on each of these four: on liquidity, on stability, on growth, and harmony.
In his response, Atiku emphasized private sector involvement and laid out a grand infrastructure plan to the tune of $20 billion in funding, and also an additional $10 billion in economic stimulus funds within the first 100 days of taking office if he wins.
We shall incentivize with regulation and tax incentives a consortium of private sector institutions to establish an infrastructure debt fund with an initial carrying capacity of $20 billion. Within the first 100 days in office, I will create an economic stimulus fund with an initial investment capacity of approximately $10 billion to prioritize support for MSCs across the economic sectors as they offer the greatest opportunities for achieving inclusive growth.
Another Twitter user summed up a selection of the reactions with, quote, a lot of what Atiku said he will do, but no mention of how. So, more specifics needed from the candidate of the PDP, but he was commended for showing up. The Labour Party candidate, Peter Obi, was scheduled to deliver his economic plans the following day, September 14th, but postponed to a yet-to-be-announced date. The candidate of the ruling All Progressive Congress, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is not scheduled to address the LCCI until October the 28th. As the clock ticks toward Election Day 2023, Nigerians will be hoping to hear more specifics from the candidates considered to have the best chance of assuming the mantle of economic leadership in the new year. Odilim, Arise News.
Thank you so much, Rotus. And for more insight into this, I have with me in the studio Arise Analyst Dr. Amadi, and of course, Dr. Odilim Enwegbara, who is a Development Economist. And of course, I start with you, Dr. Odilim. Let's talk about Atiku's agenda for the country. What's so special about having $10 billion as a stimulus fund? I mean, and where will that money be coming from?
Thank you for inviting me. Actually, for close to a year and a half now, I've refused to participate in Nigerian political affairs and economic affairs. You would have seen that. Because I'm now into phytomedicine and I'm planning to relocate to US where I've already 2 companies. But when this issue was brought to me this morning, around 8 o'clock, I said I must come. So I have removed my sworn what I have sworn to, that I will no longer appear on television. But having said that, let me tell you. In 2019, or earlier than 2019, 3 months or 4 months before we did the election, I was approached to help Atiku put together an economic blueprint, which I did, and it's voluminous, and everything you can think of how to revive Nigerian economy. It's called $1 trillion economy in 4 years. And I think it was appreciative. And everyone was happy.
Yeah, I mean, sorry to just interject a bit. That was one of the reasons why I actually
said
we must have you to talk about that, because my interest has always been on that $1 trillion economy since the 2019 campaigns.
Yes, so it was completely detailed. The only thing I want to mention here, my brother, I love this country more than I love myself. I'm not saying this thing for people to praise me. I don't need any more. At the age of 61 plus, I don't need any praises. The only thing that is very unfair to these people is that Atiku has not approached me to ask my consent even to continue to use those documents. No, it's unfortunate because I might ask my lawyers to get back to him to ask him how on earth are you using my document. But be it as it may, that is by the way. Now, the question is this. Nigeria needs more than that. What I put together, although I don't know whether I can say it here, is that we have to revive Nigeria economy as fast as possible. Because Nigeria needs to migrate from agrarian economy to industrial, and from industrial to knowledge economy. So we are going to do 2 migrations. And to do the 2 migrations is not going to be easy. But countries like India have done it, or China did it. So what we are going to talk about is a comprehensive economic roadmap. Do you know what is important in any economy, especially Nigeria? The reform of the rule of law. The judicial reform. Anything outside judicial reform, you are talking bunkum. I'm sorry to use that word, because no economy has developed without strong rule of laws. He's a lawyer. Thank God he's a Harvard-trained lawyer. Because it's when you have rule of law that anything you say will be used against you in court or whatever. I think we made that pronouncement. I didn't think I told him 10 billion. I think I said something more than. But also
that's in your own document.
I said something more than, but I will put together a process through which that should be done. So that's transparency in terms of organizing presidential small business competition, where the best, you see them and you give them the money and follow them up technically to ensure that whatever they are doing is progressive and creating jobs and things like that. But be it as it may, he has said that. But the problem is, where does he get the money? Because
which
Nigeria
is the most important reason.
Nigeria is so in debt that I don't know where he'll get the money. So, but I have already told him where to get the money, more money than even what I'm talking about. But where will he get the money? He has to say it. And how will he do it? He has to say it. Because it's not enough to say, political statement, I will do 10 billion, I'll do this. The devil is in the details. He has to appear somewhere. Either you invite him to say, if I grant him to use my paper, he can use it. But he has to tell you people, how does he raise 10 billion in an economy that is so indebted that you are borrowing money to service your debt, not even borrowing money to pay your debt, but borrowing money to service your debt. Where will he get the 10 billion? Thank you.
Well, that's it, Dr. Odilim Enwegbara. You are a scholar of high repute, and having, schooled in the UK and then, of course, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, you understand the basics of all of this. I'm coming to you now, Dr. Sam Amadi, because he has raised some very critical issues. The issues of where the money is going to come from is one aspect of it, and then the issue of political will is another aspect of it. But let's talk about this, probing the heart of this sort of conversation. If you're going to be bringing $10 billion US, there are other competing aspects of the economy that are there for you to see. He has raised that part on where the money will be coming from. Apart from where the money will be coming from, the issues of rule of law that he also raised is there. Don't forget the National Assembly. He would have to explain to the National Assembly where he intends to get the money and whether the National Assembly can grant him the appropriation powers to be able to get such amounts of money. What's your take on all of these proposals?
Well, first, the notion of a presidential system of government that we're on is that the president is the chief executive. And so during the constitutional conference, the debate, and Mwebeze talked about that a lot, why they chose presidential instead of parliamentary is the idea of having run a country more like a corporation. So you have a chief executive. So I think he has enough powers within Section 5 of the Constitution to drive any economic policy. Yes, appropriation. You go to the National Assembly and more or less, they're not going to argue. Historically, National Assembly has never obstructed around how big you want to drive the economy. They have probably changed projects you want to finance, and oftentimes put themselves in the game. So that would be the problem. I think the bigger problem for me is 3 issues. One is the coherence of Atiku's vision. Clearly, Atiku, and thankfully those who supported him a lot, Atiku has the most coherent economic policy. Now, you can argue whether it's so much focus on private sector is what we need now. Many people have argued. If you look at Tinubu's plan, it talks about governed market, it talks about bringing about price control, it talks about industrial policy, which many neoliberal economists disfavor because they think it's distortion. Government to distort prices, get the price right, allow the market. So Tinubu's, my own temperament as a more of the left of the center scholar, I'm more into governed markets, which is experience we've had with East Asia. And the notion is many of the, Atiku has been consistent from 1999. And even with Obasanjo.
Some of these some of these ideas are offshoots of those campaign documents.
So I think his temperament is clearly for a much more market-based economy.
Free market economy.
And for good reasons too. We now know that using the prices, using market is actually the best way, but it depends on how you use it. So that's one argument. The second issue is on the detailing. I think he has tried to articulate significantly how he wants to govern the economy, especially apart from the funds you talk about, facilitating SME growth. Question now is the details, tactical. What do you do at every stage? And I think that will be what his policy team will now be catching out in shows like this. At the level of presidential speak, it's big enough and fair. The second question is whether it talks also about poverty alleviation. In fact, he said at a point that his economic policy is poverty focused. To drive out
that's the same
borrowing
thing Buhari and the APC
I think he used to say what, borrowing 10 million
10 billion
a year. Yeah. But the question then is, how do you do a fiercely market-oriented economic policy and also a poverty-focused policy? Because even if you grow SMEs, most of the SMEs are small, who create jobs, but actually they create more wealth than job. I'll give you an example. Flutterwave, maybe $1 billion investment. But if you look at the team, it's just a few smart guys who are earning 6 digits. That's not how to take out millions out of poverty. So the debate remains, do you need a pro-industrial development approach, like talked about? You move from agrarian to manufacturing to service sector? Or do you need to go into this sexy economy of smart guys with laptop, tech-based, but they are really creating wealth. And by the way, when you look at the joint venture framework, most of those wealth come offshore. And so when they say they've sold Flutterwave for billions of dollars, the guys who finance it takes the money. And the guys who are the data guys take part of it. So you discover that that's not how to develop the economy. So I would say that debates will arise whether it's coherent, strategic, the best comprehensive document, but it has been interrogated along whether they can address some of the crisis of development.
I think, if you allow me to add to what he's saying, I think people have to understand that every country will come up with its own domestic economic system. I believe that if you finance poverty, you grow the economy. In 1934, when Roosevelt became president of America, remember the Great Depression, what did Roosevelt do? He financed poverty to generate what you call purchasing power for the poor. And when the poor have purchasing power, the demand side will increase as much as the supply side. So what I told Atiku in his paper, I'll bring this paper. I think I'll bring this paper to you people for the sake of bringing. But it's
we'll be glad to have it. Actually,
it's let's finance the poor people.
Isn't that what President Buhari has been doing?
No,
with the social investment program.
No, he's not doing the right way.
What will be different from that if Atiku is to do his own social investment program?
Fantastic. You asked the good question. The good question, as I put it in the papers, and I'll bring in the paper, is first and foremost identifying Nigerians that are poor, independent of ethnicity and religion. Identify them. Bring a World Bank or any highly respected agency, organization over in the world to come and do it for you.
Aren't we doing that? We have a national database of poor people in the country.
You're asking me a question. Let me answer it. So when you do that, you get the names, you profile them. Okay, let's use the word, you profile them. You have their telephone numbers and things like that. And generally, you send the money directly to them without any system. And when you discover, because I created a biometric system, which we use your iris to connect to your telephone and things like that. So when you are getting that money, it is cross-checking your iris and but it's a complicated thing to be said here. So if you do that, let me tell you, America exited the Great Depression because of this. If Nigeria can give 50 million Nigerians every month 20,000, the rural economy will skyrocket. Why? Because the person selling Accra will be seeing somebody coming to buy Accra. Somebody cutting tree, we see. So you generate that economy. Then when you bring the small business, startup business, tech businesses, it will add up. Look, it's something that we will do. If we do it, we enjoy this economy. But that's something I told Atiku has to do, which is we can create $1 trillion economy. That's something that's working for Nigeria today. The Ukraine war that is causing problem in the, supply gas and the fossil fuel supply system. Nigeria can go, I don't know whether I can say it, Nigeria can go to Europe and America, especially Europe. Look, let's have gas plan. We give you our gas for the next 20 years of 440 trillion or whatever you agree. Give us the cash. Use it to finance infrastructure. It may not be cash, it is Europeans come here and build a nuclear plant, come here and build roads, they will do it. And that will jumpstart our economy.
All right, so what you're proposing in that, because I've heard this sort of argument.
Oh, no, I did it. There's no other person who has done that.
Well, I heard that. I mean, what we'll just do is that we'll have almost like zero tax for gas, and we allow these companies to actually establish the gas infrastructure and do all of that, but the issues of sovereignty will arise.
No, you didn't understand my sovereignty. That's not what I said. What I said is, we go, you know that Russia supplies gas to Europe, and Russia is trying to use what you call economic sabotage, although I won't use the word sabotage, to ensure that Europeans will pay for other things. Now, there's a shortage of gas supply in Europe. It's a mistake Europeans made. We now go to a round table with the Europeans. Look, Nigeria has enough gas in the next 40 years. What do we do with it? We supply you gas for the next 10 years or 20 years in advance, which means you pay for it today in advance. Then we'll find a way to be taking it. But it will cost you 2 trillion euro or dollar or whatever currency. Put it in an escrow account or whatever. We use it to be fixing our economic infrastructure.
All right, I think that proposal is different from yours, but we'll just go on a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about the issues of disposal of moribund national infrastructure, which Atiku is already canvassing at the moment and he's been known with. You're still watching the Arise interview. The conversation continues. Stay with us.
I just want flex, don't need stress in my life. Avoid the yawa, I no want queue for the bank. Sharp, sharp, I don't open an account. Digital bank, we get the power, now vote. I pay my bills easily, I'm running things like a boss. Collect a loan with no collateral. Vault is the way. Vault is the answer. From Polaris Bank. Vault is the answer. Vault is the way.
Take control. Download Vault by Polaris Bank. That's VULTE. Visit the Google Play Store or Apple Store now. Vault is available to Polaris and non-Polaris Bank customers. Vault by Polaris Bank.
There's nothing better than the roar of your fans. But in Nigeria, there's a roar that may not be heard again. With fewer than 50 lions left in the wild, they could be extinct in the next few years. From loss of habitat and prey, and snares set for illegal bushmeat. Please say no to illegal bushmeat, and let's keep the roar alive for Nigeria. Poaching steals from us all.
In 1894, our first branch opened in Lagos, Nigeria. And we took our place in this new land brimming with possibilities and surprises. Take Kano, for instance, where the city's wealthiest trader made his first deposit. 20 bags of silver arriving on camelback. Aren't you glad that we offer online banking today? expanding across the West African sub-region and beyond. Our early presence made it possible for all hardworking Africans to build great things. So is it any wonder that not one, but two first bankers have gone on to become Nigeria's central banker? We are intricately woven into the fabric of society, supporting polo for over 100 years and pushing the limits of athletic performance. Rooted in tradition, but constantly leaning forward into the future. Are you coming?
You first, First Bank.
Welcome back to the Arise interview, and we are discussing some of the economic development plans put together by the presidential candidate of the main opposition in Nigeria, Atiku Abubakar, who has been explaining his economic agenda if elected president of the country in the 2023 presidential elections. And I still have with me in the studio Dr. Odilim Enwegbara, who is a development economist with extensive experience in the UK, in the US, and elsewhere. And of course, we have our own Arise analyst, Dr. Amadi. And I come to you, Dr. Amadi. Atiku is still proposing to sell off the refinery, saying that, look, instead of putting $1.55 billion in renovating them, he intends to sell it. And this is what a lot of opposition politicians have been using against him, that he's going to be selling national assets to his friends and all of that and cronies. I mean, you know what happened when he was the chairman of the National Council on Privatization. Tell us if this is not going to affect his fortunes ahead of the elections.
I think Atiku is bullish and maybe not too political with his view on the economy. So he believes that the notion that government has no business in business, which Friedman, Chicago School and other, but I don't share exactly that view. So put it this way, there are two reasonable arguments. One is that we have a failed state that's not capable of managing assets, not prudent, political risk are high. So if you say revitalize this refineries, so much has gone. In fact, today they are paying salary worth more than you need to revitalize that asset, and they're producing zero. So some economists will argue that it's better to give it to the private sector. All you care about is that they produce optimal capacity, they deliver right prices, and then the people need the fuel, and the economy goes on, and the government regulates. That's the version of the neoliberal market rules, get the prices right school of thought. Now, the other school of thought argues that, look, these assets can actually be well managed. If you get them on, first, they are national assets. Secondly, you need some level of public control of these kind of assets. Now, it looks like it's an old school thought, but the point is that even if Atiku says they're going to sell these assets, our history with privatization has not been very good. Obviously, because we don't plan the regulatory framework well. We don't plan we don't even think about where the money comes from. The private sector are coming to revitalize. They don't have the money. They don't have the managerial capacity to turn things around easily. So I think we have to put Atiku also to some serious rigor to explain what would be different.
Yeah, I had to ask you that question because this same article was instrumental to the sale of the Aluminium Smelting Company of Nigeria, Ascon, to Rusal of Russia, and today we don't see that company working. It isn't working. The Delta Steel Complex is there.
The answer that I can give you is that if you look at his plan, he talks about getting institutions right. So first, it's not just about privatize, and that's the difference between the infrastructure program of this government and what he outlines. First, the government relies, first they started with continued privatization half-heartedly. The government is not clear on its economic policy and focus. So there are two kind of contradictions.
7 years after.
Yes, there are some pro-market elements, the vice president and others, and some what they call dirigisti in France, which is those who command the economy, are also there. Buhari himself is part of that school. So they're kind of confused whether to be a governed market or what we call free market model. Atiku is very clear. Free market model. So that will help him. If you are consistent and clear, then you align the institutions, the policy, not just setting infrastructure fund, policies, regulatory capabilities. They talk about building the capacity of the public sector to regulate. They talk about also helping private sector grow capacity, because the mistake we make is that we think that it's a good private sector in Nigeria. We don't have a strong private sector. Private sector that doesn't have access to good capital. Private sector that doesn't have access to knowledge, human knowledge, and managerial skills and technology. So often, like in the electricity privatization, we assume that these Nigerian portfolio investors themselves are the kind of private sector that can incent efficiency, build capacity. So what may be wrong about Atiku's plan is that if you're too fanatical about the private sector, and the private sector don't even exist, or the private sector, there's no incentive to structure their profit maximization with public good. So you see asset stripping. We had it on the, you see people coming there with small funds, maximize to take, their own gains and profit, and leave those assets not well managed. So I would think that the coherence of Atiku's plan is that he locates his plan within all the universe of private sector market. But the weakness of it is that he has not worked in Nigeria, and therefore we see a much focus on private sector as not what you might need. You need a strong public sector. You need also to have governance. You talk about rule of law, institutions. So those institutions first need, if you look at those need, you talk about private sector, talk about value change. All these things came in, part of Obasanjo's first government. But what we see is that we had growth without transformation. And development is transforming the whole frontiers.
All right, and I come back to you, Dr. Enwegbara. Let's talk about this disposal of moribund national assets. Like I said earlier, one of the major accusations against this presidential candidate is that he's been selling public assets to his friends and all of that. I mean, we have seen Alscon and the issue of the Delta State Steel Complex and some other ones, including Nitel, which was a very, very controversial one, before the PDP administration came and pushed out this issue of the Electricity Private Sector Reform Act, again, where we saw private sector investors coming in to buy the electricity, and we still don't have power at the moment. Do you think Atiku will not get into trouble with this his penchant for always wanting to just dispose of these national assets?
First, I've told you I'm not into politics in Nigeria. And
yeah, I mean, that's why we want to listen to you.
And I will not ever speak for anybody because I'm on my way out of the country. What I would like you to appreciate is this. If you don't privatize it, if you don't sell it, what is the best option? Because you see, it's good for us to be making all these statements. In the real world, you have to be practical. The truth of the matter is that these moribund assets must find its way into the market. It must find this into the market. How it will find this way into the market is where the rule of law comes in. If Nigeria is a strong country like the United States, why I'm relocating to US is because there the rule of law, the protection of private businesses is supreme. When we have that in place, then I will assure you that the buyers will come and the buyers will be transparent. If you open it up to the world. Remember, there's accountability outside this country. The Chinese will come. Remember before Obasanjo sold this, you're talking even Atiku, you didn't remember Obasanjo sold the refineries 2 hours before he left.
And it had to be reversed because there was no public interest in privatization.
Exactly, because when you I'm not, you see, it's their game, all of them are playing this game. But what I was saying is that I put together the reformation of a Nigerian legal system, reformation of a Nigerian financial system, and the central bank. I put it clearly that it is when you do this, there will be checks and balances. Because, yeah, my brother is saying the good things, but they will not work without the framework, the legal framework is not there. So people take advantage of the weaknesses in the law. So what I'm talking about in the first place, because it will be good that I be saying blah, 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 blah. Because I said those things, that's languages I use here, you agree with me, but it doesn't, they will not, in the real world, it will not work. The first thing Nigeria should do is to create a private sector policy, law, each sector by sector.
Haven't we had one?
No. Just listen to me. Sector by sector, and we will reform the judicial system and create the court for businesses or court for whatever, the way we put it. So that anything you are doing, you're not going to go to Supreme Court for 20 years or 30 years. So that if you want to privatize something, the law will be stringent and say privatization will be transparent this way, so that Nigerians will be watching. My house, I will be on television or my radio or my phone and be seeing how you are privatizing. And everybody will be asking questions. So that when you do that, it becomes difficult. We are talking about 18 years ago, but then the Nigerians are not as active as they are today in politics. And the social system, that's called social... the media, you know,
social media
is not as it is today. So I think it's not going to get there as he took advantage in the future. But what I'm trying to tell you, whether you agree with me or disagree, I'm not interested. Let's put the legal framework that will protect, make sure anything you want to do, Nigerians will know. And Nigerians can raise questions, and when they raise questions, the questions must be answered. You can't sit in your office because you are president. You say, hey, Dr. Amadi, I said this one to you. Hey, because that's what happened before. Now if you want to sell, you bring professionals, non-Nigerians, who pay them good money. Let them come and sell. All of us will watch. When you are selling to you, we ask you why you buy. We want to profile your company and see why you buy. And you put some conditions on you that if you do not do, we get you into court and get those assets back at a certain cost. But those are the things we need to do.
But I thought the Bureau of Public Enterprises was there, I mean, it's there for this sort of purpose, this sort of laws.
No, I know Bureau of Public Enterprise, it is an agency of government that we call the man, I've forgotten his name. He's my friend. You call him, hey, the man will be running. In America, look, I'm filing patents and trademarks with the USPTO. The president of America cannot call the director of USPTO, come to, he said, what is it for? Because he is protecting public interests, he's not a politician. So it is when we separate politics from you separate the private sector, the public policy from politics, is then that you have what we are talking about.
All right, Dr. Sam Amadi, what is Atiku's plan? So, I mean, what's so different about Atiku's infrastructure plan compared to what we have right now? The Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund that we have right now, the program that's been put in place to sponsor and fund some of these mega infrastructure projects that we have. The Infraco again that Buhari has put in place, and in fact, like some of the other bills that are coming up now, the startup bill and all of that, aren't these things already in place that some of these presidential candidates, including Atiku, are proposing at the moment?
Well, they're not going to reinvent the whole wheel. I mean, the infrastructure plan has been, even before Buhari came in, there was an infrastructure plan right down to
but this government claims that particular fund is its own idea through the NSIA.
Yes, the fund. But don't forget that NSIA was also established for purpose of infrastructure financing. There'll be debate around the pension fund being used for, because you need a long tenured money. But the point here is, what's the difference? The difference is how you align all your policy to deal with the strategic focus. You see, economic plan or any plan is strategic. It's just like war. You have to prioritize. You have to say this is what we want to do. And then we start from first strategy, operations, and tactics. Alignment is number one. That's why I use the word coherence. So for example, if you want to do infrastructure and you say you're going to focus on private sector to finance it, you cannot keep laws that penalize private sector. You cannot run discretionary system like you're talking about, where maybe agency heads will have the capacity to make decisions without rule of law. You cannot sack heads of regulatory agencies at will. So some of the things that Atiku has advantage over is that he has created a coherent universe of policy support. So first, it's not just we want to have infrastructure fund. He's focusing on building private sector market. He's also focusing on taking government away from those decisions that are market oriented. We may disagree with his, maybe overzealous market orientation, but you can't quarrel with the consistency and the coherence of it. And look, in real economic or any plan, if you don't have coherence and consistency like this government, you can't succeed, because it's like you move one leg, you move backwards. So you say you're going to get foreign financing for your infrastructure development, but at the same time, much of the laws are not clear. At the same time, you are still, for example, we're talking about maybe dealing with issues around solvency. You're talking about, so some of these laws have to be in place. But I think the big thing Atiku brings to this table is the first, passion. He believes in this. Second is that he has a team that are private sector oriented experts who think around what does business need. His speech would have been well received by Chamber of Commerce, because it's the kind of speech they want to hear. But the other people who also think around governance, like you're talking about, think around coherence in terms of public sector. For example, you're talking about selling of refineries. How about implementing the Orson report and issues around redefining and streamlining the public sector against rent seeking? And that's where I think that maybe when we hear Obi, maybe Obi will come with a different version that maybe mainstreams what he's talking about in terms of a rule of law, a rule-based and
all right.
clean
Well, as
politics.
we try to round up very quickly, in addition to what you say, we didn't hear Atiku talking about the controversial issue of fuel subsidy removal or leaving fuel subsidy.
Okay. You know, there's something I want to add here. Fuel subsidy, for me, I've been against fuel subsidy because it's not transparent. It's not market-driven. It is corruption-driven. But that's not what I want to say. There's a proposal I made to this government. I said, look, to build our infrastructure, road networks, they design the road all over the country and see that we have 700,000 kilometer road, scattering the country, crisscrossing the country. Then let's show every 100 kilometer that is e-toll gate. And we create e-towing. And we give our cars e-number plate. So that as you are getting there, the thing charges your e-wallet directly. If you show it to Chinese investors, American investors, they come and build the road. For 30 years or 20 years, they will be collecting the little money for that. And that will give us world-class 7 lanes here, 7 lanes, 6 lanes, or whatever. And that is easy. It's a question of designing and showing the market value. These people took it. I'm sorry to tell you this. What is his name? Fashola took it, read it, and he wanted to implement it upside down. We are in court. Anyway, so it shows you that the problem of this country is lack of rule of law. The system does not allow people with ideas to come with the idea. As soon as you come, they appropriate the idea and be running after them. Yeah. That is the problem. Infrastructure of this country can be financed 100% by private sector. But you have to give
I just want to add, is it different from the Highway Development and Management Initiative, which Fashola had brought in place?
I am the owner. We are in court now.
Oh,
we are in court.
You actually own several copyrights.
We are in court. If you are doubting, when I bring you the paper, we are in court. Okay. My lawyer is Oyeshi Bazu.
Yeah.
We are in court.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we just hope all of these issues will be resolved. And as the economic documents of the presidential candidates come out, we'll continue to have you help us understand the issues, even when you're in the US, Prof. Since you say you are leaving, but you're not leaving for good, at least you definitely come back pretty soon.
I'm leaving for good. My brother.
No, you can't be leaving like
Dr. Amadi is my
people.
friend, so from time to time he will bring me to Nigeria.
We must thank you so much, Dr. Odilim Enwegbara is a development economist. I've been with a very, very rich dossier in Nigeria, in the UK, and of course in the US. We must thank you for helping us to take a critical look at these issues. And of course, our own Dr. Sam Amadi, who's a Rise News analyst and an associate professor of law. I mean, I thought that Amadi would be the one raising the issues of rule of law, but I mean, I saw you saying that. I mean, this shows how very, very important it is in the business sector too for us to respect our laws when we have investors coming into our economy.